Chapter 11. An hour later Dunyasha came to tell the princess that Drawn had come, and all the peasants had assembled at the barn by the princess' order and wished to have word with their mistress. "But I never told them to come," said Princess Mary. "I only told Drawn to let them have the grain. Only, for God's sake, princess dear, have them sent away and don't go out to them." "It's all a trick," said Dunyasha, "and when Yakov Alpatik returns let us get away, and please don't." "What is a trick?" asked Princess Mary in surprise. "I know it is, only listen to me for God's sake. Ask Nurse too. They say they don't agree to leave Bogocharovo as you ordered. You're making some mistake." "I never ordered them to go away," said Princess Mary. "Call Dranushka." Drawn came and confirmed Dunyasha's words. The peasants had come by the princess' order. "But I never sent for them," declared the princess. "You must have given my message wrong. I only said that you were to give them the grain." Drawn only sighed in reply. "If you order it they will go away," said he. "No, no. I'll go out to them," said Princess Mary, and in spite of the nurses and Dunyasha's protests she went out into the porch, Drawn, Dunyasha, the nurse, and Michael Ivanovich following her. "They probably think I am offering them the grain to bribe them to remain here, while I myself go away leaving them to the mercy of the French," thought Princess Mary. "I will offer them monthly rations and housing at our Moscow estate. I am sure Andrew would do even more in my place," she thought as she went out in the twilight toward the crowd standing on the pasture by the barn. The men crowded closer together, stirred, and rapidly took off their hats. Princess Mary lowered her eyes and, tripping over her skirt, came close up to them. So many different eyes, old and young, were fixed on her, and there were so many different faces, that she could not distinguish any of them and, feeling that she must speak to them all at once, did not know how to do it. But again the sense that she represented her father and her brother gave her courage, and she boldly began her speech. "I am very glad you have come," she said without raising her eyes, and feeling her heart beating quickly and violently. "Dranushka tells me that the war has ruined you. That is our common misfortune, and I shall grudge nothing to help you. I am myself going away because it is dangerous here, the enemy is near, because I am giving you everything, my friends, and I beg you to take everything, all our grain, so that you may not suffer want. And if you have been told that I am giving you the grain to keep you here, that is not true. On the contrary, I ask you to go with all your belongings to our estate near Moscow, and I promise you I will see to it that there you shall want for nothing. You shall be given food and lodging." The princess stopped. Sighs were the only sound heard in the crowd. "I am not doing this on my own account," she continued, "I do it in the name of my dead father, who was a good master to you, and of my brother and his son." Again she paused. No one broke the silence. "Ours is a common misfortune and we will share it together. All that is mine is yours," she concluded, scanning the faces before her. All eyes were gazing at her with one and the same expression. She could not fathom whether it was curiosity, devotion, gratitude, or apprehension and distrust, but the expression on all the faces was identical. "We are all very thankful for your bounty, but it won't do for us to take the landlord's grain," said a voice at the back of the crowd. "But why not?" asked the princess. No one replied, and Princess Mary, looking round at the crowd, found that every eye she met now was immediately dropped. "But why don't you want to take it?" she asked again. No one answered. The silence began to oppress the princess and she tried to catch someone's eye. "Why don't you speak?" she inquired of a very old man who stood just in front of her leaning on his stick. "If you think something more is wanted, tell me." "I will do anything," said she, catching his eye. But as if this angered him, he bent his head quite low and muttered. "Why should we agree? We don't want the grain. Why should we give up everything? We don't agree. Don't agree. We are sorry for you, but we're not willing. Go away yourself, alone," came from various sides of the crowd. And again all the faces in that crowd bore an identical expression, though now it was certainly not an expression of curiosity or gratitude, but of angry resolve. "But you can't have understood me," said Princess Mary with a sad smile. "Why don't you want to go? I promised to house and feed you, while here the enemy would ruin you." But her voice was drowned by the voices of the crowd. "We're not willing. Let them ruin us. We won't take your grain. We don't agree." Again Princess Mary tried to catch someone's eye, but not a single eye in the crowd was turned to her. Evidently they were all trying to avoid her look. She felt strange and awkward. Oh yes, an artful tale. Follow her into slavery. Pull down your houses and go into bondage. I dare say. I'll give you grain, indeed, she says, voices in the crowd were heard saying. With drooping head Princess Mary left the crowd and went back to the house. Having repeated her order to Drawn to have horses ready for her departure next morning, she went to her room and remained alone with her own thoughts. Chapter 12. For a long time that night Princess Mary sat by the open window of her room hearing the sound of the peasants' voices that reached her from the village, but it was not of them she was thinking. She felt that she could not understand them however much she might think about them. She thought only of one thing, her sorrow, which, after the break caused by cares for the present, seemed already to belong to the past. Now she could remember it and weep or pray. After sunset the wind had dropped. The night was calm and fresh. Toward midnight the voices began to subside, a cock crowed, the full moon began to show from behind the lime trees, a fresh white dewy mist began to rise, and stillness reigned over the village and the house. Pictures of the near past, her father's illness and last moments, rose one after another to her memory. With mournful pleasure she now lingered over these images, repelling with horror only the last one, the picture of his death, which she felt she could not contemplate even in imagination at this still and mystic hour of night. And these pictures presented themselves to her so clearly and in such detail that they seemed now present, now past, and now future. She vividly recalled the moment when he had his first stroke and was being dragged along by his armpits through the garden at Bald Hills, muttering something with his helpless tongue, twitching his grey eyebrows and looking uneasily and timidly at her. Even then he wanted to tell me what he told me the day he died, she thought. He had always thought what he said then. And she recalled in all its detail the night at Bald Hills before he had the last stroke, when with a foreboding of disaster she had remained at home against his will. She had not slept and had stolen downstairs on tiptoe, and going to the door of the conservatory where he slept that night had listened at the door. In a suffering and weary voice he was saying something to Tikhon, speaking of the Crimea and its warm nights and of the Empress. Evidently he had wanted to talk. And why didn't he call me? Why didn't he let me be there instead of Tikhon? Princess Mary had thought and thought again now. Now he will never tell anyone what he had in his soul. Never will that moment return for him or for me when he might have said all he longed to say, and not Tikhon but I might have heard and understood him. Why didn't I enter the room, she thought. Perhaps he would then have said to me what he said the day he died. While talking to Tikhon he asked about me twice. He wanted to see me, and I was standing close by, outside the door. It was sad and painful for him to talk to Tikhon who did not understand him. I remember how he began speaking to him about Lise as if she were alive, he had forgotten she was dead, and Tikhon reminded him that she was no more, and he shouted, "Fool!" He was greatly depressed. From behind the door I heard how he lay down on his bed groaning and loudly exclaimed, "My God! Why didn't I go in then? What could he have done to me? What could I have lost?" And perhaps he would then have been comforted and would have said that word to me. And Princess Mary uttered aloud the caressing word he had said to her on the day of his death. "Dearest," she repeated, and began sobbing, with tears that relieved her soul. She now saw his face before her. And not the face she had known ever since she could remember and had always seen at a distance, but the timid, feeble face she had seen for the first time quite closely, with all its wrinkles and details, when she stooped near to his mouth to catch what he said. "Dearest," she repeated again. What was he thinking when he uttered that word? What is he thinking now? This question suddenly presented itself to her, and in answer she saw him before her with the expression that was on his face as he lay in his coffin with his chin bound up with a white handkerchief. And the horror that had seized her when she touched him and convinced herself that that was not he, but something mysterious and horrible, seized her again. She tried to think of something else and to pray, but could do neither. With wide-open eyes she gazed at the moonlight and the shadows, expecting every moment to see his dead face, and she felt that the silence brooding over the house and within it held her fast. "Dunyasha," she whispered. "Dunyasha," she screamed wildly, and tearing herself out of this silence she ran to the servants' quarters to meet her old nurse and the maidservants who came running toward her. Chapter 13. On the 17th of August Rostov and Aline, accompanied by Lavrushka who had just returned from captivity and by an hussar orderly, left their quarters at Yankovo, 10 miles from Bogucharovo, and went for a ride, to try a new horse Aline had bought and to find out whether there was any hay to be had in the villages. For the last 3 days Bogucharovo had lain between the two hostile armies, so that it was as easy for the Russian rearguard to get to it as for the French vanguard. Rostov, as a careful squadron commander, wished to take such provisions as remained at Bogucharovo before the French could get them. Rostov and Aline were in the merriest of moods. On the way to Bogucharovo, a princely estate with a dwelling house and farm where they hoped to find many domestic serfs and pretty girls, they questioned Lavrushka about Napoleon and laughed at his stories, and raced one another to try Aline's horse. Rostov had no idea that the village he was entering was the property of that very Bolkonsky who had been engaged to his sister. Rostov and Aline gave rein to their horses for a last race along the incline before reaching Bogucharovo, and Rostov, outstripping Aline, was the first to gallop into the village street. "You're first," cried Aline, flushed. "Yes, always first both on the grassland and here," answered Rostov, stroking his heated Donets horse. "And I'd have won on my Frenchie, your excellency," said Lavrushka from behind, alluding to his shabby cart horse, "only I didn't wish to mortify you." They rode at a foot-pace to the barn, where a large crowd of peasants was standing. Some of the men bared their heads, others stared at the new arrivals without doffing their caps. 2 tall old peasants with wrinkled faces and scanty beards emerged from the tavern, smiling, staggering, and singing some incoherent song, and approached the officers. "Fine fellows," said Rostov laughing. "Is there any hay here?" "And how like one another," said Aline. "Most mrry koimpa," sang one of the peasants with a blissful smile. One of the men came out of the crowd and went up to Rostov. "Who do you belong to?" he asked. "The French," replied Aline jestingly, "and here is Napoleon himself," and he pointed to Lavrushka. "Then you are Russians?" the peasant asked again. "And is there a large force of you here?" said another, a short man, coming up. "Very large," answered Rostov. "But why have you collected here?" he added. "Is it a holiday?" "The old men have met to talk over the business of the commune," replied the peasant, moving away. At that moment, on the road leading from the big house, 2 women and a man in a white hat were seen coming toward the officers. "The one in pink is mine, so keep off," said Aline on seeing Dunyasha running resolutely toward him. "She'll be ours," said Lavrushka to Aline, winking. "What do you want, my pretty?" said Aline with a smile. "The princess ordered me to ask your regiment and your name." "This is Count Rostov, squadron commander, and I am your humble servant." "Koimpa, New York," roared the tipsy peasant with a beatific smile as he looked at Aline talking to the girl. Following Dunyasha, Alpatik advanced to Rostov, having bared his head while still at a distance. "May I make bold to trouble your honor," said he respectfully, but with a shade of contempt for the youthfulness of this officer and with a hand thrust into his bosom. "My mistress, daughter of General-in-Chief Prince Nicholas Bolkonsky who died on the 15th of this month, finding herself in difficulties owing to the boorishness of these people," he pointed to the peasants, "asks you to come up to the house." "Won't you, please, ride on a little farther," said Alpatik with a melancholy smile, "as it is not convenient in the presence of." He pointed to the 2 peasants who kept as close to him as horseflies to a horse. "Ah! Alpatik! Ah, Yakov Alpatik! Grand! Forgive us for Christ's sake, said the peasants, smiling joyfully at him. Rostov looked at the tipsy peasants and smiled. "Or perhaps they amuse your honor," remarked Alpatych with a staid air, as he pointed at the old men with his free hand. "No, there's not much to be amused at here," said Rostov, and rode on a little way. "What's the matter?" he asked. "I make bold to inform your honor that the rude peasants here don't wish to let the mistress leave the estate, and threaten to unharness her horses, so that though everything has been packed up since morning, her excellency cannot get away." "Impossible," exclaimed Rostov. "I have the honor to report to you the actual truth," said Alpatych. Rostov dismounted, gave his horse to the orderly, and followed Alpatych to the house, questioning him as to the state of affairs. It appeared that the princess' offer of corn to the peasants the previous day, and her talk with Dron and at the meeting, had actually had so bad an effect that Dron had finally given up the keys and joined the peasants and had not appeared when Alpatych sent for him, and that in the morning when the princess gave orders to harness for her journey, the peasants had come in a large crowd to the barn and sent word that they would not let her leave the village, that there was an order not to move, and that they would unharness the horses. Alpatych had gone out to admonish them, but was told, it was chiefly Karp who did the talking, Dron not showing himself in the crowd, that they could not let the princess go, that there was an order to the contrary, but that if she stayed they would serve her as before and obey her in everything. At the moment when Rostov and Aline were galloping along the road, Princess Mary, despite the dissuasions of Alpatych, her nurse, and the maids, had given orders to harness and intended to start, but when the cavalrymen were espied they were taken for Frenchmen, the coachman ran away, and the women in the house began to wail. "Father! Benefactor! God has sent you," exclaimed deeply moved voices as Rostov passed through the anteroom. Princess Mary was sitting helpless and bewildered in the large sitting room, when Rostov was shown in. She could not grasp who he was and why he had come, or what was happening to her. When she saw his Russian face, and by his walk and the first words he uttered recognized him as a man of her own class, she glanced at him with her deep radiant look and began speaking in a voice that faltered and trembled with emotion. This meeting immediately struck Rostov as a romantic event. A helpless girl overwhelmed with grief, left to the mercy of coarse, rioting peasants. And what a strange fate sent me here. What gentleness and nobility there are in her features and expression, thought he as he looked at her and listened to her timid story. When she began to tell him that all this had happened the day after her father's funeral, her voice trembled. She turned away, and then, as if fearing he might take her words as meant to move him to pity, looked at him with an apprehensive glance of inquiry. There were tears in Rostov's eyes. Princess Mary noticed this and glanced gratefully at him with that radiant look which caused the plainness of her face to be forgotten. "I cannot express, Princess, how glad I am that I happen to ride here and am able to show my readiness to serve you," said Rostov, rising. "Go when you please, and I give you my word of honor that no one shall dare to cause you annoyance if only you will allow me to act as your escort." And bowing respectfully, as if to a lady of royal blood, he moved toward the door. Rostov's deferential tone seemed to indicate that though he would consider himself happy to be acquainted with her, he did not wish to take advantage of her misfortunes to intrude upon her. Princess Mary understood this and appreciated his delicacy. "I am very, very grateful to you," she said in French, "but I hope it was all a misunderstanding and that no one is to blame for it." She suddenly began to cry. "Excuse me," she said. Rostov, knitting his brows, left the room with another low bow.